Hi, and welcome back to the Legends of Sport podcast. I'm your host, as always, Andy Bernstein. I'm so happy to bring this conversation to all of you for this week's episode. J.A. Adande and I have been friends and colleagues for well over 30 years. He has covered all the same NBA events and historic games that I have, being based in LA for most of his career as a sports journalist. J.A. was a columnist for the LA Times, then segued to in front of the camera and microphone for ESPN. Many of you know him from his regular appearances on Around the Horn and Pardon the Interruption, as well as SportsCenter and many games doing sideline reporting. On this episode, we covered a lot of topics. We covered J.A.'s start and passion for sports journalism, his anecdotes about covering Kobe for 19 of his 20-year career in L.A., the Shaq and Kobe era, Showtime, and even how sports journalism has evolved over the years, and so much more. J.A. is now wearing a new hat in his career, returning to his alma mater as Director of Sports Journalism at Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism, Media, and Integrated Marketing Communications, preparing the next generation of sports journalists. I'm super excited about J.A.'s new book, which was just recently released, called The Year's Best Sports Writing 2022. It's a fantastic compilation of amazing stories and writers that I found fascinating. I encourage everyone to go out and get it on Amazon, and we'll also be posting a link on our social media as well. So enjoy this really fun and informative conversation with my friend and legendary sports journalist, J.A. Adande. And as always, I'll see you on the backside. I got to welcome my friend J.A. Adande to the Legends of Sport podcast. Jay, so great to see you, man. I know you're a busy guy. You got so much going on. So thank you, man, for taking the time to chat with me today. How you doing?
I'm great. Great to see you. Thank you for having me on. And should we tell the story the last time we saw each other in
Yeah, I was
person? How
just
that
gonna
came
say
to
that,
be?
man. I just literally just saw you like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, in one of the more magical places in the world.
Yeah.
So the backstory of this is I was supposed to celebrate my 50th birthday in Maui
Uh-huh.
in October of 2020.
Yeah.
But as you can imagine, October of 2020, I don't think the island was even open for
Yeah.
visitors.
I think you're right.
So we had to postpone it. I postponed it all through 2021, and I was going to drop the idea. And my friends were like, "No, let's do it. Let's put it together." So I
Mm-hmm.
arranged everything, and I said, "You know what? Since we're not actually doing it on my 50th birthday now, I'm going to pick a date that is a little more conducive
Mm-hmm.
for everyone to make it. Trying to get to Maui in October, especially for people that cover the NBA,
Of course.
is a little troublesome. And I'm
Yeah.
in school here at Northwestern at that time. So I picked the weekend after Labor Day
Mm-hmm.
and went out there and wound up having a great time. Rainy the first couple of days, and then it was just great the rest of the weekend. And it was a perfect celebration of my 50th birthday. And then my last morning on that Monday,
Yeah.
I'm walking along Wailea Beach and I see this 6'9" guy and he calls my name out and I'm like, whoa, it's Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
What are you doing over here, Irvin? And he says that they're there for a reunion of the
Yeah.
Showtime Lakers from the 80s.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I said, man, I would love to stick around and say hi to all the guys. And I was
Yeah.
debating whether or not I should. And as one of my media buddies told me, hey, you're never going to see these guys in such a relaxed setting again,
Of course. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
So I changed my flight for a day. I extended my hotel stay for a day, and I would have done longer, but that was the maximum I could push it. And I had to get back to work. And so
Yeah.
I came down to the opening reception where all you guys were down there, and I see
Yeah.
you there,
Yeah.
trusty camera in tow, and Magic and Michael Cooper and Bob McAdoo and Pat Riley and all
Dude,
the
it
guys. It
was
was
it
great.
was crazy to see all those guys together. I mean, what a moment. I mean, we could spend a whole podcast talking about that, the Showtime Lakers, but the fact that Magic and Pat were so generous and they flew everybody over super first class for a week and
Did they pay for the hotel rooms?
yeah, everything, man.
Wow, because I
Nobody
looked into getting a room to stay there for that night, and when I heard
yeah.
the prices, I said, I think I'm gonna head back over to the Marriott.
It was crazy. I mean, I just finished putting photo books together for everybody. I did 42 photo books.
Wow. Boy,
So
like, did you do individual ones for
yeah,
everyone who was
but you know, you
there? Oh,
figure a
wow.
lot of those people were couples, so there had to be, I don't even know how many people there, close to 80 people there. I mean,
Wow.
it was insane. But the highlight, of course, was seeing those guys out on the court doing a walkthrough, you know.
Did you
But
shoot those videos? Because I saw some videos
I
on
didn't shoot
Twitter.
video, I shot stills of it. And
Okay. Who shot the video?
you know, I think Spectrum was out there doing a
Okay.
backstage Lakers thing. And you know, at first we were told it was super private, don't like even bring your phone. And then they asked me to just, I was invited as a guest, but hey, bring your camera because you know, Magic and Pat probably want to have a few pictures. Of course, I took it upon myself to take it to the next level, and because I really wanted to cover it like I would normally cover something. And I knew that we would all regret it if I didn't have, you know, a whole gigantic file of pictures. And then all of a sudden, all the guys were posted on their social media, so it wasn't quite private anymore. You know, and then Spectrum showed up. Um, and so anyway, you know, just going to the practice and seeing the guys suited up and on the bus, and you know, Kareem, 75 years old, God bless him, he's out there shooting sky hooks, you know, and he's had some health challenges, and all the guys are creaky and all that, but they like went back in time, man. It was like these guys were back on the bus, you know, back in the 80s when they used to go to Boston Garden or go fight the battles, you know. And it was incredible for me. It was one time in my career really that, maybe other than the dream team, but I didn't know much back in those days, where I like would have rather have not taken a picture. You know, I would have just
Wow.
like, wanted to
Wow.
just be there to watch this thing. But
Well,
I'm so
was it
glad I
weird for
did.
you, Andy? Were, was it weird? Were you trying to figure out your role? Like, because you were invited.
Yeah.
So did you
Yeah.
think of yourself as a guest or did you think of yourself as the person who had to document this and take the photographs?
Well, first, I was really honored that my wife and I were both invited, you know, as guests. I was also very touched that they had considered me part of that experience, that family, that history, right? And look, it's natural for them to ask me to bring a camera, so that's what I do. I don't. I'm sure they didn't invite me because, oh, we need Andy to take pictures, and that's why we're inviting him. I really felt very much part of the entire experience. You know, going back to the '80s, and then of course right now. So it was wonderful, man. Magic asked every single person, you know, players, wives, Gary Beatty, doesn't matter who you were. He asked every person to stand up and speak in front of the entire group at one point during the week.
Mm.
And that was so incredible. I mean, hearing everyone's story, but, you know,
So
Spencer
what did you
Haywood.
share?
I
If you mind, if you don't mind repeating.
who's doing this podcast? No, I'm kidding. I shared two things. I shared about how, as a young photographer, um, I learned confidence from Magic, right? I
Mm,
learned two things from Magic. I learned work ethic because this guy literally came to work every single day. You know, he very eloquently talks about his dad having two jobs and working 7 days a week and watching his dad go out, you know, 4 o'clock in the morning and then wouldn't be home until after midnight. And that was his mentality as a player, which was really impactful for me as a young photographer. I mean, I was very driven and, you know, had a great work ethic that I got from my dad. But just to see, you know, he would bring it every single game. Didn't matter if it was a 30-point blowout in the third quarter. You know, he was still playing like it was, you know, a playoff game or whatever, practices, everything. And part B to that confidence story was um, I think it was my second year, so which is his third year, and I had gotten a really great plum assignment to shoot him for Converse,
mm,
and he was, as it normally happens, he was shooting the video part of the commercial on a sound stage, and then I was set up with a backdrop and the whole thing, and the whole premise of what I was shooting was magic across the world, you know, and the idea was like they were going to put a, you know, I didn't even want to say Photoshop because it wasn't, but they were going to stick a world in there, you know, globe, and then he was like stepping over it, you know, and it was actually a cool idea at the time. So I had an assistant, I had a stand-in, the whole thing. Now keep in mind this is back in the film days, right?
right.
So he comes in and I have probably 5 minutes to do this while they're changing shots or whatever. And we knew each other. He was very nice. We weren't like friends at that point, but there was a nice camaraderie. He goes, "What do you need me to do?" I said, "Well, this is the move." And he gets in there and in the set, and he starts to do the move, and I take off the film back from the 2.25 camera, and I stick a Polaroid back on there. And as I'm doing that, he says to me, "Whoa, what's going on? What are you doing?"
Mm.
And I said, "Well, I'm going to take a Polaroid to see what the lighting looks like and the placement." And he goes, "When I come on your set, you be ready. I don't do Polaroids."
Wow.
I'm like, okay, never did a Polaroid again. So
That's-
but that was a moment of truth, man, because like, what was I going to do? Of course, I'm not going to do a Polaroid, but I had to be ready, and I knew that every single time I shot him.
you
So
know, it's funny. My very first interaction with him, first time he ever really said anything to me, he he was basically telling me to be ready too.
yeah,
So this goes back 41 years now. 1981 summer, I'm at his basketball camp. He used to
right.
do his annual camp. This year it was at Pepperdine, and so we're going through the drills. He used to kind of walk around and take in all the drills as we were doing them in the morning. So we're going through the drills, and I had like a little hooded sweatshirt on, and
Hmm.
I see him walking over towards us. We're doing these passing drills.
Yeah,
So now I'm starting to get into it. I'm getting worked up. I take off my sweatshirt and put it down. I'm getting loose, and I'm putting everything into these passes, right?
yeah.
And he walks up to me. I'm like, Magic's walking over to me. He's going to tell me what a great job I'm doing. This is so great. He leans over. He says, "Next time, leave your coat up in the room."
Oh,
And he walks away. And that
yeah.
was it.
That's
But
crazy,
it,
man.
it, it got better from there. And it's funny. I told him, arguably the reason I was even in Maui at that point, I had the means, for
Hmm.
example, to be in Maui.
Yeah.
And really, honestly, the course of my life is because of Magic.
Nah,
The
that's
reason
crazy.
I got into sports media, the
Really?
reason I cared about professional sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I told him that. It was cool. I had the chance to tell him that.
Mm.
I'd gone around the dinner table at the big dinner I had Friday night of that birthday weekend, and I was
Mhm.
telling everyone who was there, friends and family members, just trying to thank them for the role they had in my life. And
Mhm.
I was literally thinking the next day, I should have invited Magic. I don't know if he would have come, but
Yeah.
he's a part of this, and I have a lot to thank him for. And then I run into him,
That's
and
crazy.
so as we walked back to the hotel, I spent a lot of time thanking him and telling him the role that he had in my life. And it's funny that that coin toss in 1979 to determine the first pick in the NBA draft
Hmm.
changed my life. It
Yeah.
changed my life because I was aware of sports a little bit. I remember watching in the late 70s
Yeah.
the Dodgers and the Yankees in the World Series, but I didn't pay close attention. I remember Magic played Bird in the
Hmm.
NCAA finals in 79, but I
Right.
didn't watch it.
Yeah.
I was just aware of it. And then he comes to the Lakers, and I really wasn't paying that much attention. And then for some reason in the playoffs, I just got into it.
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
win the championship. And the enthusiasm that he had, the
Mhm.
excitement, he made playing basketball seem so exciting.
Mm.
And and just his charisma.
Yeah.
And I think it helped. So I want to be like him in every way. So it helped bring me out of this shell. I was probably a pretty introverted kid.
Yeah.
And I think I patterned some of my personality after him.
Uh-huh.
And then I wanted to play in the NBA, and I wanted to play for the Lakers. And about eighth grade, I realized this probably isn't going to
Yeah. Right.
happen.
Right.
Probably
Right.
not going to work out, because I didn't hit my growth spurt. My wasn't much of a growth spurt, but what growth I did have didn't come till much later. So I realized early on I
Yeah.
wasn't going to be playing in the NBA. But I used to go to the games at the Forum, and I said, I want to be here
Mhm.
somehow, some way. And I'd look and see Chick Hearn
Yeah.
in his spot, because I was sitting up above, where Chick sat at the
Sure.
Forum, way up
High
there.
above the
So
western
so my
skyline. Yeah.
seats were higher above the western sideline. So I'm looking down at Chick Hearn, and
Yeah.
then I'm also looking at the riders down on the baseline where they used to sit at the Forum.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be somehow at the Forum and be a part of that. And I thought, okay, through media, either being a broadcaster or being a writer, that will enable me to be a part of that. And ultimately it did.
Yeah.
But I
Wow.
I, I owe it all to Magic.
Wow, that's incredible. What a great story. I mean, you and I have similar paths. I knew I'd never be Bud Harrelson or Rod Gilbert growing up, but I love going to Mets games. I love going to Ranger games. That's really how my dad and I bonded were over sports. And and then we got into photography at 14 and started to do a lot of it into college. And then I decided, well, why don't I just marry the two things I love the most, put them together and be a sports photographer. So, before we get into your new book, which I really want to talk to you about, but I want to talk about the experience that you and I had when you came down to the baseline, right? And you sat with me with a camera and experienced what it's like to literally be in the trenches. What was that like for you? First of all, let's set that up because I honestly don't remember the context of how that happened or why that happened.
It was something that I wanted to do for a while. I thought it would be fun
Mhm.
to see what it's like. And one
Yeah.
thing I tell my students is try to understand the perspective of everyone around, and everybody has a story. And
Hmm.
I had seen your work over the years, and then I got to know you once I started working at the LA Times and at the games, and we talk and I really had an appreciation for what you did, and
Uh-huh.
as well as an appreciation for the what you produced. And I don't know the specific when the genesis of the idea came from, but at some point I said it would be cool to shoot a game with Andy Bernstein and see what it's like, and
Yeah.
just try to become an NBA photographer for a day.
Yeah.
And so I set it up through the Clippers. I
Right.
figured, okay, they might have a little more room on the sidelines there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
we
what
we
was it? What was it like for you, man? What is that experience like?
it was fun. It's funny. One of the lessons I learned is that no matter where you're sitting, there's always somebody closer than you, or there's always from a photography perspective, you can always get
Yeah.
blocked by somebody, like the referee. For one
Absolutely.
time, there was like a ball boy that came out on the court and was cleaning up and blocked my shot.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing, the lesson I learned, and that I tell aspiring photographers, the key thing you told me is that if you see it, it's too late to shoot it.
Right.
And that if you're like, oh, that would be a great shot, by the time your brain processes all that and you press the shutter button,
Hmm.
they still call it shutter button.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The time you press the button
Yeah.
is too late.
It's done. It's
Yeah.
history. Move on.
And
Yeah.
so what I learned is okay, you have to know the sport
Hmm.
and be aware of when something's about to happen. And you can tell when somebody's about to pull up for a shot. You can tell when somebody's going to go. An interesting one, I think back all the time that so I was on the baseline when Scottie Pippen dunked on Patrick Ewing in
Uh,
the 1994 playoffs.
right.
That was actually the last playoff game at Chicago Stadium.
Yeah.
And I remember he gets the ball on the wing, and the way he gathered himself, and he was
Yeah.
kind of far out
Yeah.
to be dunking that, especially with Patrick Ewing under there. And as he
Right.
started to gather, I remember thinking, oh my God, he's going to try to dunk this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just from seeing him, especially him, I've been watching him all year and just watching the way he moved.
Hmm.
And so if I was taking a shot that night and I knew what you had told me years later,
Mm.
if I was shooting, I would, okay, you got to start shooting then. As you see him and as it's dawning on me that he's going up to dunk this ball,
Yeah.
that's when I got to start shooting if I want to get that shot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've been burned so many times. And as you know, because you experienced it, I get one shot every 4 seconds. I'm not
Yeah.
on a motor drive. God bless all my colleagues who sit there and lean on a motor drive. It's wonderful. You can shoot 12 frames in a second and pull one out. But I'm limited to that one shot because of the strobe system. So I can't tell you how many times I've been burned. Blake Griffin used to burn me all the time because he would go up and then he'd keep going. Um,
Right.
or
And it
man,
wouldn't come out of nowhere. And
yeah,
he would do
yeah,
dunks that he had no business dunking, right? So
yes,
you wouldn't think, as many games as you saw, you weren't thinking, oh, he's about to dunk that,
absolutely.
because he had the audacity to try those dunks.
Yeah, but then I said to myself, when he is on the court, do not take your eye off of him through the viewfinder. Like Chris Paul could be bringing the ball up, but then peripherally, I'm like, where the hell is Blake? It's like something's gonna happen. That dunk he had over Kendrick Perkins, if you see the video,
Yeah.
literally in like a millisecond, like he got the ball and just went up, boom, and went right over his head. And of
Did you
course, I
get
had
that
to
one?
get the peak action of that and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
Did you
I
get that
got it.
one?
I got it.
Okay.
I got it from multiple angles, but I also got burned on a lot. So anyway, Jay, let's get into a little bit about your career. So, since your days at the LA Times, right? You've done so many things in the world of sports journalism, sideline reporter, writer, on-air personality for ESPN. You covered everything from the NBA, Olympics, Super Bowls, Final Fours, all that stuff. And of course, people listening and watching this will also know you from your regular appearances on ESPN's Around the Horn and Pardon the Interruption. You even dipped your toe into this world of podcasting, right? With our good friend and former podcast guest, by the way, BJ Armstrong, on Beyond the Lens, which I listened to everyone, was fantastic. So now you're wearing a new hat. And this is what you and I never really have talked about this since you put this other hat on. You've returned to your alma mater as director of sports journalism at Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism, Media, and Integrated Marketing Communication. First of all, how do you get all that on a
Yeah,
business
that's
card?
like I just say Medill School.
So the question is, um, why the left turn? I mean, like, why did you leave the court? Because you're you seem to be flourishing in what you were doing. Like, to me, it was kind of a sudden thing. I'm sure it wasn't for you, but all of a sudden, wow, Jay's like back teaching school now. How did that all come about?
Yeah, so it wasn't an abrupt left turn. I'd been drifting into that lane, to use
Uh-huh.
the car metaphor, because I've been teaching as an adjunct professor at USC since 2004.
Right.
And I started doing that. That came up very suddenly, but it was something I'd always had, honestly, since the days I was taking classes at Northwestern. I would
Hmm.
think I'd like to come back and teach one day. And I'm thinking, it's a little unfortunate that I'm going to school here in the Midwest, because I saw myself working and living in LA.
Hmm.
And I was like, it'd be nice to have this connection here in LA.
Yeah.
But I was able to get an opportunity to start teaching at Annenberg at the USC school. And I really enjoyed it. And I told people it was my favorite thing that I did, but it wasn't something that I could think of doing full time for what they were paying adjunct professors.
Sure.
And so I did it. I would only, a couple of years I did 2 semesters, but I really had to cut it down to 1 semester, the fall semester, because in the spring,
Hmm.
NBA
Yeah.
playoffs,
Yeah.
travel, all
Traveling.
that, it
Yeah.
just wouldn't work.
Mhm.
So I was doing that for a dozen years. And then they had a new dean at Northwestern, and I was back for my 20-year reunion in 2012.
Mhm.
And the new dean at the time, Brad Ham, I met him for the first time, and we started talking. And then over the years, he started saying, we got to get you here. And, what can I do to get you here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we took a trip to Tokyo. Actually, me, him, and Christine Brennan did a panel on Olympics. This is a few years out when they were getting ready to host the Olympics in 2015,
Yeah.
and we did a thing on covering the Olympics, and so we got a little closer through that. And then uh, about a year later, he made it happen. And first it didn't work, and then some things changed, and they were able to make an offer. And it's probably the only place I could do this position, because I don't have anything beyond my bachelor's degree, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
get into the field of higher education, they like you to have master's or
True.
PhD. And my argument was, I only have a bachelor's degree, but it's from this school.
But yeah.
So if you're
Yeah.
saying that's not good enough, what are you saying? What are we saying here? So this is probably the only place I could do something like this, have a position like this,
Mm.
as the not just professor, but as the director of sports journalism. And
Yeah.
so it was time, and I just felt like I was ready. Also, I, at first I wasn't ready to leave ESPN and all that. So I did one more year while I was here
Uh-huh.
of close to full time.
Yeah.
I did a lot of games. I covered the whole NBA finals. I was traveling just about every week during the season, working sidelines,
Mhm.
and it was way too much. So after the end of that first year, I said, okay, I can only do one of these, and it's time to make
Yeah.
that move. And it had been, that the 2017 NBA Finals was my 20th NBA Finals. I know that's a small piddling number to you, but
No,
that was a significant
that's a
number to
number.
me,
Yeah, for
and a
sure.
nice round 20. And I said, okay, I can step away now.
Yeah.
I feel like I've told all the stories I want to tell,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Interesting, man. But then I was seeing you around and I'm thinking, Well, you just explained it, but you were kind of wearing two hats at the same time. It's kind of like what I'm doing, actually. I'm weaned myself off the court, away from the ice, whatever I'm doing. My photography business is still going. I'm doing less. The NBA has been really amazingly um, gracious in letting me kind of ease off. And I want to, keep my career going as long as I can. Kobe had that great saying that how do you know when he wanted to retire? Because he woke up yesterday, didn't want to go to the gym and shoot baskets anymore. I'm not at that point yet, but I physically cannot travel like I used to.
Yeah.
Doing 4, sometimes 5 games a week is insane, right? And we do a lot of other stuff. We're doing everything out of the campus at LA Live, of course, and LA Kings is a big client. So you're preaching to the choir. I get it. And at one point, I
And the
will.
pandemic made it a lot easier too, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
watching
yeah,
the sideline reporters that were working those games in the bubble, and they're like in the stands,
yeah,
right? And
yeah. I
and
know it
the
was
people they're
insane.
talking to are wearing headphones, and they're doing
I know.
even the courtside interviews are remote. So I said,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't miss that at all.
Did you go to the bubble at all? Did I
I
see
didn't do the
that?
bubble.
Okay.
No,
And yeah.
I stayed away. I haven't been. So they just reopened the NBA locker rooms
Mhm.
to the top tier people, and
Right.
I don't know if I could get that credential now because I don't
Oh man,
cover as much. So
I think you got the juice. You could get it there. Oh, yeah. But if about the bubble, just really quickly, because I was there 53 days. I hadn't picked up a camera from March 10th to August 27th. Literally,
wow.
it was insane. Thank God I had the NBA bubble for work to like go and make some money. Uh, and it was a crazy experience. It's all this story. But did you read Ben Golliver's book, Bubble Ball, about the bubble?
I didn't.
You
I gotta
got to
check
read
it
that
out.
book. That book is, and he was on the podcast, and I didn't know Ben really at all. He was one of those guys you see all the time, but you just don't really know him. But the book was like spot on about
Hmm.
the experience because he was there like 111 days or some insane number. It's like prison
Wow.
sentence.
Yeah, I talked to some people really liked it because it was cool because
Yeah.
the the access was better than I thought it would be.
Hmm.
And so basically they'd hang out by the pool with
Yeah.
players and talk and share a
Yeah, we were
glass of
all stuck
wine. And
together. Look,
yeah.
I became really good friends, close friends with, I mean, I was friends with Mark Spears before, but he and I became very close. He single-handedly like educated me on all the social justice issues that were going on. Um, I was embarrassed that I didn't know enough about what Black Lives Matter meant. I've been working in this industry for so long, and all that shit came down that summer. It was really it was amazing. At some point, we have to sort of all revisit that as we get a little bit
Yeah.
more distance from it because it was such a historic moment in so many ways. Uh,
And then the shutdown, right, that emanated when the
yeah,
Milwaukee Bucks said we're not going to play today. We can't
yeah,
play, and then it just spread throughout the whole sports world. But it
yeah.
emanated from the NBA bubble.
Jay, that happened the night before. We go down there. You have to go immediately into quarantine. And so that was on the 7th night of my quarantine. I was literally coming out at 10 o'clock in the morning the next day to work. And then they shut the league down. And Nat Butler, my buddy, and I, we arrived the same time. We're like texting each other, like, are we going home tomorrow? I mean, what was this all about? Shutting our rooms for 23 hours and 45 minutes a day.
Wow, you can only go out
Essentially
for 15 minutes a day.
15 minutes and only down the hall. You could not talk to anybody. You had to be double
Wow,
masked down the hall to get tested and back to your room.
wow.
They delivered the meals outside your door. You were hermetically sealed in your room in Central Florida in the summer.
Mm,
So enough said about that.
gosh.
So
Wow.
Jaya, you're teaching this new generation, just like I do. I've been teaching at Art Center, my alma mater, then teaching at Mount St. Mary's, and now I'm working on a sort of a masterclass workshop that'll be coming out next year. And things are just so different for you and for me, for where we started. And with you, and I've talked to many of your colleagues, Mark Spears, Howard Beck, Brad Turner, so many guys that that I know about how things have changed. The players now control their narrative. They're on social media 24/7, right? the access is less and less than it used to be. There's no, sidling up to a guy, or any of that stuff. The layers are just insane that you have to go through, right? So, what's your advice to this new generation? Like, how do you teach them the art, the skill of sports writing, um, when it's so much different now?
Well, I will say that there's still a need for the media, and even though there's means for these athletes and coaches to have direct access and to speak unfiltered, as they like to say, through social media, their own podcasts, what have you, there's still a need for that verification, that sometimes filtering is a good thing,
Mm.
in that the journalist can weed out what is spin or fluff and get to what the truth is.
Hmm.
And so there's a need for that. And it's interesting that the Draymond Green story really showed the need, and I think helped validate us. Even though he's the one that's been the most outspoken about the new media and leading the charge in that direction with his podcast,
Hmm.
what happened when he punched Jordan Poole and he felt the need to apologize? And he said, and I give him a lot of credit for this, he said, "Yeah, I could have gone on my podcast, but I feel like I need to face questions. I can't just sit behind a microphone in my laptop and talk. In order for this to be more authentic, in order for you to see and hear my contrition, I have to take questions from people, from outside people."
Hmm.
And so everyone assumed he was just going to go on his podcast and talk about it, but no, he met with the media first.
Got it.
Also, a lot of stuff that people want to get out there,
Hmm.
you can't say that. Just both the rules, literally what's written in the collective bargaining agreement of the NBA, in addition to just the way our society works, there are some things that you cannot come out and say,
Mm.
but you can feed it to a media member
Mm.
and have them report on
Well,
it.
give me
And
give me an example of that. I got one
so,
example.
well, I mean, like a lot of trade rumors, right? If
Right,
if
right, right.
if you're interested in trading a player and you want to let people know that this player is available and you want to maybe put some public pressure out there, then you tell the media. Or if a player wants to get traded,
Mm.
again, in the collective bargaining agreement, Adam Silver has really been adamant about players not making trade demands publicly,
Mm. Hmm.
right? But there's nothing stopping that player's agent from telling the media that this player would like to be traded, or maybe even spinning and saying the team is looking to trade this player,
Sure.
right? So you can have that same effect, but it won't necessarily get traced back to you.
Yeah.
So it's important to have the media to fulfill these roles. But mostly it's important to have the media to ask questions, to hold people accountable. And that's one of the most important functions of the media, is we're supposed to hold people accountable.
Hmm.
So holding your team accountable, if your team isn't performing well, if you don't like the direction it's going in, holding them accountable is one of the things that we do. And there's still a need for that.
Right.
Fans still want that, and they will still gravitate toward that and appreciate that.
No, that's perfectly said. I mean, I get it totally. What was your experience with Kobe like? One on one or in the group setting? I mean, how was he friendly to the media? I mean, I'm doing my job. I'm not really paying attention to the questions, quite honestly, or the body
it,
language or the
it
facial.
was an interesting arc,
Yeah,
and because there were so many stages of Kobe and he was
yeah,
around so long. And
yeah.
I was in LA for 19 of his 20 years. I was in DC his rookie year, 96, 97. I actually was in the building for his first point. Were you in Madison Square Garden
It was
his
not.
rookie year? Did you make that
No.
trip?
Mm-mm.
It's funny. I didn't realize this until a year or two ago, that I'm one of only a handful of people that can say they're in the building for Kobe's first point and his last point.
No way. That's
And I
amazing.
didn't, because I didn't realize it was his first point,
Wow.
because it wasn't his first game. So he was
Yeah.
hurt. He actually missed the opening night,
Right.
and then he plays in the second game and he doesn't score. And then his third game is in Madison Square Garden. So I was in DC. I went up to the Garden and he made one free throw the whole game. And so I saw that. But I got out there when he was a rookie, and then
Uh-huh.
his early years when they were still at the Forum. And so back then he's a teenager and he's excited,
Yeah.
and he loved everything. And media was fun for him. He loved the attention,
Yeah.
right? So he was very enthusiastic about doing the media at that point. And then you start getting into the battle for control of the team between him and Shaq, and there's some tension in the locker room. And then there's the media is starting to get divided into the Shaq camp and the Kobe camp.
Right.
And I tried to, walk the line in between two of them, because to me, you had to have access, and you had to have a relationship with both of them. They were both vitally important to the team, so you couldn't shut one out. But I was Shaq was friendlier and more accessible, and I
Mhm.
related to him. And the way that the things were, Shaq was right at that time that the team should go through him, and he should be the focal point based on the league and the way the league was then. And it'd be interesting if we put that team together in the modern NBA that's not low post driven, what
Yeah.
how that would look like. But at that time, I thought he was right, but also Kobe was the one that should have the ball in the fourth quarter
Mhm.
because he was
Yeah.
more likely to make his free throws and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they made it work. People thought it was dysfunctional. Obviously, they made it work well enough to win 3 championships, and then it came to an end. And then so those years after Shaq, uh, you might think it'd be easier to deal with Kobe because now you didn't have the two of them, but the team wasn't successful. I
No.
held Kobe partly responsible for that because if he had been adamant that he wanted Shaq and Phil to stay, they would have been there.
Right.
He didn't speak out on their
Yeah.
behalf. So
A
so
lot
that
of
that
drama.
valley that they hit, yeah. So he and I, we literally went a whole year without talking. One of those
Really?
years, like 2004 or five or something like that. We didn't speak to each other for the whole year.
Had
And
you writ
then
had you written something that he just
I
reacted
wrote one
to?
thing in particular in the fall of 2004 that really set him off. And
Yeah.
I actually went a little. I made assessments of his character that were too far.
Mm.
It's not really fair. It's fine to critique the player and the decisions he made, but I took it a step further and criticized his character. And I realized that was too far. So I went to apologize to him, and he wasn't really even trying to hear the apology. He walked away and cursed me out before I
Oh.
could finish my apology. And then, so one of those years, 2005 or six or so, first day of training camp, media day, I go up to him and said, "Look, Kobe, we've had our differences. Let's bury the hatchet." And he said, "Deal." And we shook hands,
Yeah.
and we were fine after then. And then
Yeah.
we got closer. We kind of had our ups and downs, and then really those last couple years, as they were no longer really championship contenders, and he was the wise old man, and he'd settled into that phase of his career. That
Yeah.
was actually the most I enjoyed being around him and
Yeah.
talking to him.
Yeah.
But also, he had perspective too. That he was someone that could talk about what it was like to play against Michael Jordan. Not
Right?
many people in the league at that stage had actually experienced playing against MJ. So he had this wise perspective. He could. I remember I covered the game when Jeremy Lin scored 38 points
Yeah.
against the Lakers in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have to talk to Kobe because Kobe's the one that can really put this into perspective and show appreciation. So I walk up to him and I said, "Kobe, you know what it means to have a game like that in this building.
Right.
And so tell me what's the significance of a 38-point game in Madison Square Garden?" He says, "It's the last of the historical arenas.
Mhm.
It does matter more." And so just going to him for a perspective like that became something I valued. It's fun. Actually, somebody just showed me, they post on my Facebook page the picture that you took of me and Kobe walking out
Right.
the day that he announced he was going to retire.
Yep.
And
Remember it
and
well. Yeah. Yeah.
so there's a couple pictures that you took, and a friend of mine actually snapped a shot, a little fuzzier, of me and Kobe walking out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Vanessa and Gigi's there too. It's really poignant to look at that photo now.
Yeah.
But we got to the end of that walkway, that tunnel in Staples Center, and I said, "Kobe," I kind of repeated, "Yeah, we had our tough moments, but one thing I appreciated about you is that you always gave us something to write about.
Yeah.
You
Right.
you provided so much content for it." And I said, "For that, I
Yeah.
thank you. You gave us so much material to work with over the time, so I'm really thankful for that."
I can
And
imagine
we
him laughing his
yeah,
deep,
yeah, we
long
we
laugh.
shared that moment.
Yeah.
There was a lot of time uh, just walking. I'm sure you took a lot of pictures. Those pictures I'm referring to were in that walkway from
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Laker locker room
Yeah.
over to the parking area, and
Yep.
we would just share a lot of moments. I would go out and strategically try to time there was a vending machine out there by the
Yes.
loading dock, and I
Right.
would try to strategically time my visits to the vending machine to when I thought Kobe might be walking by, and we could have a little exchange.
Yeah.
He could tell me what was on his mind. So that was when I got to get the downloads of what he was really thinking about, who he was
Yeah.
mad at, or this. So we had a lot of those moments that I'll keep private.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
it was fun, and one that was very public. So they go down 2-0 to the Mavericks,
Hmm.
and, and what wound up being Phil's last season coaching the team, last series coaching the team. And as we're walking out, the crowd were all walking back to the chick room press room, and
Yeah.
Kobe's walking, and he says, "Don't do it, JA. I know what you're thinking. Don't do it," because he knew I was about to write him off.
Right. Right.
And so he
Don't
turns to
poke
Mark
the
Stein and
bear.
says, "You too, Stein. Don't do it. Don't do it." And I explained to him, I'm like, "Kobe, I got it." And I was telling him, "Okay, you guys are doing this or that. You're old. You're tired." He's
Mm.
like, "Yeah, but," and I said, "Yeah, but what?" And he goes, "Yeah, but dot dot dot."
Yeah. Well, you among others. I mean, Howard Beck told almost the same story about
In
sort
the
of.
elevator.
Yeah, and like Kobe kind of giving him the cold shoulder for a long time, and then having to get back into his graces and all that. But you're right, never a loss for content. That's for sure, man. Wow, great. I was at the get together that NBA Entertainment put together with an interview with Shaq and Kobe, just the two of them together. I don't know if you
Mhm.
saw that in Jeannie's
Yeah, when they
office.
when they they sort of
Yeah,
mended fences
and it
and
was it was such a beautiful moment of just making amends, turning the cheek, to the other cheek, all that stuff. And they realize, I think they both at the same time in that moment realized, wow, if we had just done this a little differently, but what happened. And,
yeah.
and
But
back
they
on it.
did appreciate what they had together.
Yes.
And actually, the last time I saw Kobe in person was at Shaq's statue dedication.
Mm-hmm.
And
That was a beautiful moment. Yeah.
yeah, and it was touching too, because for a
Yeah.
while Shaq was on the outs,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
really wanted that statue and that validation. He really wanted to be validated and recognized there with that team.
Sure.
And his relationship had cooled,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, with that franchise. He went. I remember when he was playing with Phoenix, and he comes in. They were in the visiting locker room. He's in the trainer's room getting taped, and media is not supposed to come in there. And he motions for me to come in,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "Do you think they'll retire my jersey here?"
Yeah.
And he was worried and concerned that he might not get his jersey retired
Wow.
there, and they did. And I know when Jerry Buss passed away, I know Shaq was really grateful that Jerry Buss had signed off on the jersey retirement. And
Mhm.
that happened before Dr. Buss passed away.
Yeah.
And I know Shaq was really appreciative that they were able to come back together,
Yeah.
and that he was able to be honored by the Lakers while Jerry Buss was still alive.
Yeah.
That mattered to him.
No, for sure. Um, well, listen, man, I want to pivot to your book, okay? Because you got it behind you. The book is called "The Year's Best Sports Writing 2022." It's a there you go. When is it coming out? It's coming out like
It's out. It's
it's
out
out.
this month.
What?
Yeah,
Go get
it's
it,
on.
people.
When,
Yeah,
when one of my former students texted me a picture, he's
love
like,
it.
"Look what I saw at the bookstore." So it's out. You can get it on
Oh,
Amazon. You can get it at
congratulations, man.
Triumph Books.
Yeah.
It's really cool, and it's. I'm kind of surprised at how much pride I took in it, because it's not
Mhm.
my book. I chose what's in the book, but mostly it's the work of these great sports writers.
Right.
28 stories in there.
Uh-huh.
I did write the foreword,
Yes.
but my name is on it,
Uh-huh.
and I did put a lot of work in making the selections.
Mhm.
And so when I got the box of the books shipped to me, and I pulled it out, and I'm looking at this book with my name on the cover, and I thought, this is really cool. And I was really proud of it, and it
Yeah.
made me want to do another book so I can experience it, and maybe fully,
Yeah.
where every single word in the book is mine. But just having this moment was
Mhm.
really cool.
So you sent me an advance copy, which I read, by the way, the entire thing. And it was such a diverse, the subject matter was incredible. The writers were diverse, which is something you, in your introduction, you talk about the fact that you felt is very important to have a diversity, racially, gender wise, all that in who you selected. What was the process like? Because there's thousands of stories written in a calendar year. Was somebody I mean, filtering that or doing some advanced stuff for you? How did that happen?
So I had a panel
Mm-hmm.
of colleagues, and then the series editor, Glenn Stout, who was the founder of this series.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the last. Another reason this is a collector's item. This is the last one that Glenn was directly involved in.
Wow.
So
Mm-hmm.
he was one of the panel members. So he gave some suggestions to me, and he also gave me some advice on how to do it.
Yeah.
And so him, Paula Boivin,
Mm-hmm.
who's at ASU, Richard Deitch, who's at the Athletic, Greg Lee,
Mm-hmm.
who was at the Athletic, NBA, now back at the Boston Globe, Liliana Limon Romero, who's out there at the LA Times.
Oh yeah.
She's an editor there. And so I asked them for like 20 selections each. I created a email account and posted, hey, if you want to submit something that either you did or something that you really liked that stood out to you,
Yeah.
you can submit it. So I think I got a couple hundred via that email account.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, then I had to go through them, and and then I was reading myself, and I
Yeah.
created a file as I'd come across outstanding works of sports writing. I would save it and reviewed it all at the end of the year. And so as I talked about in the forward, I said, you know what, I want this to be about writing, not sports journalism. I want this to really be about the writing. So
Mm-hmm.
Baxter Holmes had the story, the great investigative report on the Phoenix Suns, which led to Robert Sarver announcing he's going to sell the team.
Mm-hmm.
That was ineligible by my criteria because that was great journalism,
Yeah.
but it wasn't transcendent writing. That wasn't about the writing. And I was really looking for storytelling that took you someplace, that
Gotcha.
captivated you and took you someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned diversity. That was important to me, and really being intentional about that, and making sure that we had different race, gender,
Mm-hmm.
LGBT,
Mm-hmm.
religion, all those things
Yeah.
were in there. And I think what this shows, though, is that diversity doesn't have to come at a cost of quality.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very diverse collection in here,
Mm-hmm.
and I would argue, feel free to disagree, but I would argue it's an outstanding quality collection too. And I just want people, no matter what your background is, where you're coming from, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to identify somehow with either the stories or the storytellers, to
Yeah.
say, okay, this person represents me. I feel represented in this book.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a wide variety, a wide array of people that can say that when they pick up this book. You'll see
Absolutely. I mean,
yourself in there.
yeah. I mean, the stories were amazing. You do talk about the difference between sports writing as two words and sports writing one word. I mean, we don't have to get too deep into it, but from your background, you talk about, you were a young sports writer, sports journalist, and you just explain it. It's about the storytelling, right?
Right.
Sports writing as a singular word, right? Probably is more about reporting about the game, sort of surface kind of writing, right? But sports writing is like
Yeah.
I have
Writing about sports. Right.
writing about sports. Yes, I mean, look, we are all fans of, and we're brought up with some of the greatest sports writers of all time. And one story that in Sports Illustrated that will always stick with me was a Gary Smith long story that he
Mm-hmm.
wrote about Muhammad Ali, which is just an incredible story. I mean, I go back to that; it's just amazing to me. Um, you have a quote in your introduction where you say, "quote Journalists should not tell what happened; they should explain what happened." Right? Explain why it matters and why we should care. Um, that's a lot to have to put on somebody when they're at the game. You also talk about the two people that had to absolutely be represented in the book as subjects were Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, right? Because
Yeah.
of the significance of everything about the two of them, off the field of play. And the stories that you chose were incredible. I mean, really hard hitting, deep, um, different,
And they were, yeah, exactly. They were very different
different.
because
Yeah.
the Simone Biles story, and that was told by a non-sports writer.
Yeah.
Uh, that one really was her debriefing and
Mm-hmm.
an extensive interview with her,
Mm-hmm.
in which she described everything she went through in 2021, from the Olympics to her body just shutting down on her,
Yep.
to also having to revisit all the traumatic things she'd been through when she testified on Capitol Hill. And
Mm-hmm.
so you got to hear it through Simone Biles, and also you got to see it through the lens of a Black woman. Like when the Simone Biles story was going on, I remember thinking, I only want to hear Black women's perspective on this.
Mhm.
Right? Nobody else, Black man, white women, like nobody else, I think, is really appropriate to tell this story because they can't understand all the additional weight that the pressure that was on Simone Biles as a Black woman. So I need to hear from a Black woman's perspective what this is like,
Yeah.
and that's who told that story.
Mm.
And then we had the story of Naomi Osaka told by a white man
Mhm.
who didn't speak to her. Naomi wasn't really doing a lot of media, and part of me was thinking, A, this might be the future of sports coverage, period, is if our access over 2021 was really limited and restricted.
Mhm.
So the onus is on you really being observant. And
Mhm.
what was great about that story was that he told the story just through observing every little details about Naomi Osaka, the way she would blow on her fingers
Right.
before she served, the way she would nod at her opponent to acknowledge, like, okay, you ready? I'm getting ready to serve. This sort of a
Yeah.
politeness
Yeah.
that she had. But every little thing about Naomi, she might hang her head after a double fault. Every little thing about her and the way she moved and the way she behaved, telling the story and interpreting that and being able to really show you what she was going through just by the way she moved and acted.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really skillful way. And so you had two opposite ways of storytelling and two outstanding things, which I think both in their own way let you know about these people.
Yeah, well, hats off to you, man, because I know it's a tremendous project. It's a lot to take on. It's a lot of responsibility. You don't want to leave anybody off to the sidelines
And,
because
and and that's the only hard
that's the
thing. But
hardest thing.
I say the flip side of that though was seeing the joy when people got their copies of the book and they saw they were in it and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
would share it on social media and people were happy for them. That
yeah,
was really cool. And
yeah.
I was happy to be able to provide that moment for them.
That was great, man. The only last thing I want to say about it, which was so poignant for me, was in Marcus Thompson's story about Steph Curry, right? And this the title of his article of his story was Stephen Curry is not the MVP. He's something much more, right? And then he had the great quote in there. He says about Curry. He says, "quote His dominance is another reminder to cherish the greats while you've got them." And that just hit me, man, especially about Kobe and everybody else. But
Yeah.
you know, you and I just we spend our lives going from this game to that game, this airport to that one, and do we ever like really sit back and say, "Wow, this is like going on right now in front of me, man"? And I had that experience with, of course, doing the book with Kobe was, I was front and center with that. But when I went back to the Showtime reunion, back to the beginning of this interview, um, I never took that in back in the day. I never
Mm.
like sat back, wow, this is like freaking Magic and Bird going at it in like the 85 finals. Yeah, I was just doing my job and getting in, getting out. And sometimes I'd go back to the hotel and I'd have some reflection or, when Sports Center started, you can relive a lot of it. But that just hit me between the eyes because it's living in the moment, it's being present, it's appreciating what you have in front of you. And we're so fortunate as journalists to have entree to that world, that so many people don't, and responsibility to impart that to everybody through what we do.
Well, I will say, Andy, as part of the nature of the job is as a journalist, you're so focused on that day and this moment
Hmm.
and telling this particular story. So I think it does force a focus and an attention to detail about this moment. You do live in the moment.
Yeah.
And I used to say that as a journalist, time didn't pass quickly or slowly because every day, all that matters is that day's story.
Right.
And you do have these moments where at a big moment you realize, okay, this is significant in the history of the league,
Hmm.
right? That 2016 NBA Finals, and you knew going in that Game 7 between the Warriors, either the Warriors are going to complete this 73-win season, or Cleveland's going to complete this comeback from this 3-1. This is one of the significant moments in the history of the league, one way or the other.
Yeah.
The Ray Allen shot
Yeah.
in Miami in that Game 6.
Sure.
And I remember thinking at the time, because one of the things as a columnist, you're always trying to put things into context and provide perspective. And I thought this was the best NBA Finals game I think I've seen since 1993 that double overtime or triple overtime,
Triple.
whatever it was.
The
It was
Phoenix.
triple overtime,
Yeah,
right? Suns
triple. Yeah.
and Chicago, and also biggest shots since that Paxson shot that ended that series. And
Of course. I
so
mean, they
that
were
was my
already,
first finals. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they were already giving
So
the Spurs the trophy that night. I mean, it's
yeah,
basically like, getting the locker
Tim
room
Frank had
ready for the
counted
whole
up
thing.
Tim Duncan was going to be the MVP. So I actually wrote about that night. I wrote about the yellow rope. So as you know, that yellow rope, and you're one of the few people that are privileged to be able to go inside that rope, but there's that yellow rope that they bring out at the end, near the end of the
Yeah,
finals, to keep
absolutely.
everybody out so they can do the trophy presentation.
Yellow
And it was
rope.
out. And the funny thing is, I still can't, like, you see it, you don't see it come out,
Hmm.
but all of a sudden you're looking, and even if you watch the replay of the game on TV, all of a sudden it's there,
Yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah. They
all of a
rehearsed
sudden
that,
it's
by the way.
gone.
Yeah, I know it's
But like
crazy.
you don't see it come or go, but you just notice the
Yeah,
yellow rope is there, and then you notice the yellow rope is gone.
yeah,
And I talked to Dwayne Wade about that years later. I said, "Did you know the rope?" And I was asking the Spurs. Yeah,
yeah.
I was in the Spurs locker room. Did you see the rope out there? Like, yeah,
Oh,
we saw the rope. We knew what
yeah,
that meant.
yeah,
So some moments like that, and I've been
yeah,
privileged to be at a lot of them. But I do try. I do try to take that moment and just, hey, what are we watching? How fortunate are we here? Are we to be in the building to
yeah.
see this, to be able to talk to the participants and get their perspective right away,
Mm.
and then maybe down the road, we don't always get something like what yeah, in Maui decades later, to be able to reminisce with them.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
was cool. But that team, I did realize it at the moment in Maui, maybe not so much growing up, but it hit me that, again, I'm doing what I do
Hmm.
because of those teams. I
Yeah.
told Pat Riley that. I said, Pat, I got
Interesting.
into this because of these guys around here. And then he just said, he said, no one was like this. And I think he said when they started, when they all got together and they had that
Yeah.
circle at the start of that reception at night,
Yeah.
no one did. Magic said it. No one did it better than us.
Yeah.
And Pat Riley said, he said there was nothing like these guys.
Right. And no other organization, team could, or dynasty could do what they did. I mean, they bring everybody back. There were guys, there was like a couple of guys they couldn't even find. Like they couldn't find Chuck Nevitt. Like Chuck had
Wow.
like, gone AWOL and, living a private life somewhere, and no one had a record of him. They had to like hire a private investigator, not really, but to find him. And Wes Matthews, Larry Spriggs, Tony Campbell. I mean, they were all so grateful to be there. Well, listen, man, you have been so gracious with your time, first of all, and I value our friendship so much, JA. I wish you all the best. If you ever need somebody to talk to, young sports photographers, I'll get on a plane and be there the next day because I love doing it. And you used to bring your class. Remember, you used to bring your
Yeah, bring him
basketball
out to
class, and we
Staples
take a
Center.
picture and stuff. So I miss that, but it's so great to connect with you. Best of success with the book. We're gonna pump it on our social media, and I'm sure you can get it on Amazon very easily. But I wish you all the best with that, man. Congratulations, and thanks again for being a great friend and a great guest here at Legends of Sport.
Thank you. I appreciate our friendship and the chance that I've had to spend talking to you all those times at the Chickering press room. And
Right?
it was great to catch up with you here. And it's great to see you in Maui. That was a
Yeah,
special part of it. And thanks for the picture with Michael Cooper.
yeah. I had to do like a triple take. I was like, that looks like JA.
What is he doing here?
That's awesome. Hey man, take care. Winter's coming, so be careful. But I hope I see you somewhere soon. I'm sure I'll see you. Our paths will
Yeah,
cross.
I'll sneak out there. You'll
Yeah.
see me at a Laker game before
All
too
right.
long.
But the offer is there because I would love to see what you're doing there at Medill and be part of it in any way. If you want to point anybody my way,
All
who
right, you
might,
you say that now, but
I'm
I'll
happy.
invite you to come out and speak in February. We'll see if you're up to it.
Dude, I got my big coat. I'll be ready. I never spent a colder winter than or a series of winters than going to Chicago, walking from into gate 3.5. Right.
Yeah, like 1988 All
Oh
Star
my
game, I'm
God,
sure.
with that wind coming through and dragging my equipment behind me. Oh my God. But for you, I would do it. All
Appreciate
right,
it.
my
Great
man.
talking to you, Andy.
You too, pal. Take care.
You got it.
Well, it was so great to catch up with my good friend J.A. Adande today. I wish him the best of success with his new book, The Year's Best Sports Writing 2022. I miss seeing J.A. in the bowels and trenches of NBA arenas. but I know he's doing great work mentoring the next generation of sports journalists at the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University. Keep leading the way, my friend. Thanks again to JA for stopping by to share his story with all of us on this week's episode. Remember, folks, you can find us on the iHeart app and online, as well as Apple and Spotify and your favorite podcast platform. Keep following us on Instagram at Legends of Sport, our Twitter at Legends_of Sport, our website, legendsofsport.net, and of course, our YouTube and TikTok channels, Legends of Sport. My photography can be found on Instagram and Twitter at ADB Photo Inc. So thanks everyone for continuing to support the Legends of Sport podcast. Remember to rate and review and tell all your friends. We'll be back next week with another great guest and episode. Until then, stay safe and stay well.